Hello and a very warm welcome to ET Studios brought to you by ETHRWorld and UKG. I'm your host Devina Lasson. Now, India's frontline workforce is at the heart of its global growth story. As organizations move from simply managing headcount to building real capability, the conversation is shifting towards skills, towards experience, productivity, and of course, intelligent use of technology. So, in this session, we will explore how leaders can reimagine the frontline, making it the future, ready, globally competitive, and of course, deeply human at the same time. Joining me today are very esteemed guests Dipankar Ghosh, Group Head HR Apollo Tyres, and Sumeet Doshi, Regional Director, India Business UKG. Right, gentlemen, a very warm welcome to ET Studios. Thank you so much for joining us today. Such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us.
It was a pleasure that we have been called by Equity Studio for this session.
Yes, thank you. And we're here with the two absolute subject matter experts, I would say, to deep dive into this whole factor of what it means to rethink the frontline workforce of India, right? As we are moving into an era, of course, where there are national goals like Make in India and so much more, the impact of the frontline workers has never been more important. We'd love to understand from each of you, just as an opening thought, what is changing now and how leaders need to rethink the frontline workers, the way they are managed, the way they are trained, skilled, challenges. We'll deep dive into all of that, but just an opening thought of why it's more important than ever to think about this today. Would you like to take start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way that we have, when many of us who have entered the industry, it's really because bad. And the way we have seen workforce, particularly frontline workforce, the way they work and the way today they work are entirely different. And I will give you certain reasons as to why that is. One, emergence of gig and people who are coming on a short-term basis and they may be doing multitasking or something which is almost like official now moonlighting in IT industry. Now coming specifically to the manufacturing industry which I represent, I think from a world of complete permanent blue collar shop floor workers, the model that we had for the longest period of time, today one of the important part that is adding is also outsourcing of lot of jobs, lot of contract workers coming into the force, and also we are as part of government mandate are also required to give lot of on job skill training to a category of people which are called in various names like naps, nats, PM internship schemes and all of that. Which means today if you go to a shop floor, you will have 3, 4, 5 varieties of workforce with different demographics, different qualification, different age and aspiration, and hence different skilling need for some of them, making the thing much more complex. And when you run multi-country operations, multi-state operations, and workforce is a state subject, the complex just accentuates. And that's the big difference that we are seeing in today's context.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I think great points. And I think just to add, frontline workforce are the backbone of any economy. In fact, 80% of the world's workforce is frontline workforce, right? And traditionally, as organizations in India, we've not sort of taken care of them as much as we take care of the non-frontline workforce, if you will. But that is changing. The aspirations of these people are changing, as Dipankar just mentioned. And unless you drive the right initiatives to engage them, to make them more aligned with the organizational objectives, you will not win them. So a more engaged frontline worker delivers more for your organization. So I think one of the things that is changing is greater engagement needs. And the second thing, which I think we'll discuss in a lot more detail, is we keep talking of the world moving into a skills-based economy. While the large part of that discussion tends to happen in the so-called white-collared world, that transition is also beginning to be seen in the frontline workforce world, where instead of having a name, you're really looking at how can you make skills fungible across the organization. So I think that those are some significant changes that we are seeing today.
And if I may add to that context, one of the big thing that has also happened is this new labor code which has come, the compliance requirements. Now, this has also changed the way we look at various categories of employment, and government has been extremely proactive in bringing some measures where we bring the fringe workforce into mainstream, like the gig, like the trainees, and make sure that while we skill and use them towards the agenda of made in India or manufacturing India, we also remain compliant and make sure that certain basic tenets of justice and fairness is applied, making managers like us life a bit more complex.
Yes, surely. Yes, thank you for mentioning that, because compliance, of course, is one very important factor. But surely, as organizations are scaling, there must be so many challenges, like you say, so many complexities that come up when it comes to managing the workforce, the skilling, compliance, just overall the productivity levels, making sure they are on track. Can you take us through some of these challenges that you are facing today as a leader?
And I think that is basics of management science. We have been reading and practicing for the last 3 decades, right? You always have a limitation of resource and you make sure you make the best out of the business. What essentially is happening is we would be having an huge cost pressure of everything that we manufacturing because of our friends from outside the country who can manufacture at cheaper rates. We all know, and why still parts of Indian manufacturing is a bit protected, but we need to be aware that this may not go forever. And to be a world player, we need to produce at a price and at a technology level which is at par with the world. So cost will remain a challenge, which means you have to optimize the amount you are spending on manpower. Productivity has to go up because that's the only way that you can manage cost. However, there is a compliance requirement, a huge compliance requirement, which if not complied, you tend to cross the line, and that's what can be a bit of a challenge today. And third and the most is between these two counterintuitive thing, you have a quality. You can't compromise on quality because if you want to be a global player, your quality today, Apollo Tyres where I work, we sell our tires in mainland Europe, where we are fighting with the Michelin's and the Pirellis. So you can't compromise on your quality, which means your major frontline workforce has to be trained, and even if they work for a small period of time, the purpose for us is to skill them quickly and make sure they are good enough to stand on the shop floor. So these are those contradicting challenges that we are dealing with every day.
Wonderful. Thank you for helping us understand. That's such unique insights. And, Sumit, coming to you from your vantage point, of course, you work with a whole cross section of industries, regions. So you truly see the complexity across the board. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you're seeing organizations using the various frontline management tools, but perhaps in today's day and age, they're still sort of fragmented? What are you observing when it comes to this? And how would you say organizations really need to think about the tools that they are using, especially as they scale in India?
Great point, in fact. So as I think you put it well, that as organizations scale, the complexity of managing the frontline workforce increases exponentially. And many times these organizations have multiple plants. And that just increases the complexity so much more. So let me try going in this way. When we look at managing the frontline workforce, there are three broad dimensions we need to manage. One is Dipankar already talked about compliance, right? When it comes to giving overtime or managing the shifts, it's more about frontline workforce than anyone else. So compliance is key. At the same time, we also need to track their productivity. What is the number of units per man hour that they've produced? So this is something that we need to track all the time. Who's available, who's not available, scheduling the right person at the right time with the right skill. That's a constant activity. And at the same time, these are set of people whom we also need to engage well. So I say this, that with frontline workforce is the only set of workforce where compliance, business outcomes, and employee engagement actually come and clash.
Wow.
It's not that each one of them automatically try to improve the other one. They, in some sense, at times are mutually exclusive. There are plant managers who might actually violate some compliances in order to get more production done.
Right.
And you don't want that to happen,
Yes.
right? So coming back to tools, what happens with most organizations is these things are almost entirely in silos. Compliance is kind of done after the fact, probably in tools and systems that are semi-automated. Tracking the right set of people on the shop floor so that the right productivity is available is a business shop floor job.
Sure.
So not much is done there. And then the employee engagement is largely a secondary thought for frontline people. What is needed is tools that can bring all of this together and in a way try and manage the jugglery of these three balls that you're probably juggling in air.
Yeah.
And that's what some of the leading companies like Apollo Tyres and others are trying to do. But it's a long way to go for a lot of companies. And that's when we'll be more competitive.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. Dipankar, of course, no conversation on the future of the workforce can be had without talking about the skilling, upskilling, right? These are the big buzzwords in talent management today. Now, in an organization as vast as Apollo Tyres, what are some of the pathways that are really working for you when it comes to skilling such a vast frontline workforce? Also, what are some of the factors that have not worked? It'll be very interesting for viewers to understand.
So actually for organizations like us, where tire, unlike automobile, while we often say that we are part of automobile industry, tire building finally ultimately requires a bit of human skill and not really as automated as a automobile is. At the end, somebody has to touch it to realize that, oh, it's okay, it's good to go. So that's the kind of human perception we are talking about at the final finish area, which means our skilling requirement is much more complex than some of the highly automated industries where it is completely a machine line assembly line. And the way that we are looking at, we actually have three-stage process. The first stage is something called a induction training, where our frontline workforce go through an exhaustive 120 days of classroom, followed by on-job training, followed by supervised operating training, which we classify as L1 cadre, L2 cadre, and L3 cadre. In fact, for our classroom training, we actually, and that's also a norm of lot of automobile industry, we have something called a dojo center. A dojo center is nothing but, in Japanese word, a mat where the martial artists play or muscle. So we consider our training centers as dojo center, where you actually practice your skill on a live situation. So that's the way we do at the first 120 days. Thereafter, there is skilling certification requirement after every periodicity before we declare them ready to work implemented. Now that's more theory. That's something that's nice to show on paper. What has really been a challenge, and that's what we are working, is ultimately when we talk with workforce or frontline workforce, ultimately they work as a mentee of a another blue collar worker. Now, are they being able to play the role of mentor? Challenge is, never before they have dealt with this kind of junior operators with them. And we are challenged in making them mentors, which is much easier when we talk about the same concept in white collar. Our second challenge is, how do we actually ensure their retention? Because he rightly spoke about engagement. You put so much effort and your attrition is as high as, often close to a double digit a month, which means you are churning almost 100% a year. So how do you retain skill? And then third, how do you make the skill fungible across multiple points? So we are working on this. Are we there? We are not. And there are multiple challenges that are coming on the way.
Yeah, and increasingly, I think to his point, I've seen with a lot of customers that we're working, skill fungibility is something everyone is looking at. While we talk of a large workforce in India, I think skilled workforce is always a little bit of constant challenge, if you will. So a lot of companies are beginning to, and we are not talking of, again, high-end companies. We're talking of workers in the manufacturing shop floor, and companies are looking at skill fungibility there.
Absolutely. So what are some of the factors that you really think leaders must keep in mind? Dipankar, we'll start with you. When it comes to navigating these various challenges, there are trade-offs, as we are talking about as well. Whether we are looking at scale, efficiency, productivity, sometimes there might be a little bit of a gap between them. So what are some of the factors that leaders must keep in mind to ensure as seamless a process, especially when scaling?
The base has to be that organization needs to be first clear around this workforce strategy. And I think the manufacturing world is still on a process of reinventing themselves as to how my workforce strategy should work, basis the pressure of cost, the pressure of quality, and the pressure of compliance, each pulling in different directions. So that's one. Second is, when you do skilling, the first thing we need to understand is it needs to be scalable, it needs to be uniform, and it needs to be what I say as bite-sized learning. You can't have trainings or skilling which go on. It has to be a continuous circle of pedagogy, followed by andragogy, followed by application, back to pedagogy again. And that's again great in theory. But when you start practicing it, it's a challenge. The third is, how do we make sure you bring the ecosystem, the hierarchical ecosystem, and there is a hierarchy in a shop floor. It's almost like a regimented world. How do you bring that hierarchy, buying the management concept of the new workforce strategy? Unlike armed force, I think we most in manufacturing world are still struggling around how every step they know this is what I need to cover because they are my men, because we are introducing new workforce. And I would guess that's happening across industries agnostically as we are mixing multiple kind of workforce in the same hierarchical setup, which was not the case.
So interesting. Yeah, Sumeet, great time for you to come in again from your vantage point, your experience level. Again, what does it take really to skill this workforce that, as we are saying, there is already a hierarchy. There are many systems when it comes to frontline workers, perhaps not necessarily as yet in sync with new age technology that's coming in. What are some of the factors that really takes to enable the workforce with the right skill set to ultimately enhance performance, right? That's what every organization is surely looking for.
Yeah, so I think there are both softer and what you might call as more quantitative, quantifiable factors. So as trainees join in, as employees join in, I think Dipankar already spoke in detail about how they take them to different training programs. Now, the training program will vary from different company to company, but that's absolutely critical. I think so. Many a times, one of the challenges we've noticed is you hire a skill, you train a skill. After you train a skill, you've got to deploy that skill.
Yes.
And it's the deployment of the skill at the right time, at the right place is where the challenge also comes many times. You probably have the skill, but maybe you didn't get the person to be available at the right time, right place, right shift. And to me, this is where technology can come in with a lot of help. Let's talk of a very large company like Apollo Tyres, 10, 15,000 employees. If you really have to find the right skill at the right time, it's not a manual job. And traditionally, a lot of this identification on the shop floor tends to happen manually. This is where we think technology can help uh, to deploy the right skill. One is skill enablement, and I think there are enough programs and avenues that organizations have. But once you have the skill, have you deployed the right skill to deliver the best outcome, which is where productivity comes into play. And that's where we see a significant scope of improvement by getting the right tools in place.
Okay. And of course, we can't have this conversation without talking about the impact of data analytics. Um, how is it really playing a role here, right? Because we're looking both at a combination of understanding the workforce challenges, the right moments, like you're saying, deploying the right skills. So, keeping all these factors in mind, how are you seeing in your experience that data and analytics is really helping organizations to streamline the frontline workers and ultimately, yes, impact performance?
That's a great point. And I mean, I'll kind of extend that to data analytics and AI, because AI is an extension of data in a sense, right? Uh, in an organization, the maximum, we don't realize this, but the maximum amount of data points that we capture for any workforce is the frontline workforce.
Right.
For a non-frontline, we may not even capture when he's coming, when he's going, what is the shift schedule. We don't capture many of those. But for a frontline worker, every day his attendance in and out is captured.
Yes.
His shift is there, his leaves are there, his overtimes are there. So think about the number of data points you're capturing in a year for a 10,000 employee organization. That's close to a crore.
Wow.
So, but no organization really has done enough with those data points. It's a treasure trove of data. The kind of analysis that you can do about trends, about using AI to even predict a lot of things around people's turnover, around predictability on absenteeism or availability, and so much more is phenomenal. And that can actually help you drive better business outcomes. So you're right. Organizations like us who provide the technology platforms to organizations like theirs, one of the things that we are doing now is how can we now, the systems are there, how can we now leverage some of the data to be able to provide this insight to our customers and then take it to the next layer, which is essentially AI.
Yes, wow, fantastic. So, gentlemen, before we wrap up, let's leave our viewers today with a key takeaway from each of your very unique perspectives of what it really takes to transition the frontline workforce into a very unified, digitized, workforce here in India as we're seeing scaling taking place on such an unprecedented level. So what's that key takeaway? Dipankar?
So my key take is very clear: is digitization will be the key. I think we clearly have a very mature digitization journey so far as our white collar is concerned. But most manufacturing organizations, at least in India, have quite a long way to go to use digitization data and insights through what's actually happening on the shop floor. You would be amazed to find the kind of technologies that is there to figure out what machine is doing wrong. But when it's come to what human is doing wrong, or when there is a less production in a line, the whole analytics around, did I put the right skill? Did he have the right skill level? Was it an human error, and what's the remedy? That's not something we are used to.
Yes.
You are very used to machine intelligence, but that's a long way to go. And I think that's where we should be looking at it.
I think there's absolutely no disagreement with Dipankar on this. Just put it slightly differently. Have a frontline first mindset and invest in frontline technologies. I think that's absolutely needed for organizations to scale up.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, sharing all your insights. Truly inspiring to understand what the future of the frontline workforce in India looks like in these times where scaling is taking place at an unprecedented level. Thank you for being here and sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, what emerges clearly is that the future of work will be shaped not in boardrooms alone, but on the front line, where capability, technology, and human experiences converge. The organizations that invest today in skills, in intelligence, and meaningful employee journeys will truly define India's next phase of global leadership. Thank you to our speakers and to all of our viewers, and do stay tuned to ET Studios for many more in-depth conversations. Until next time, many thanks for watching.